28-year-old Amanda Blackburn had a gift. She saw beauty where everyone else saw trash. At garage sales around Indianapolis, she'd hunt through piles of junk, broken chairs, old tables, weathered furniture. She'd drag them home, sand them down, paint them, and bring them back to life for her small business, Weathered Willow. But it wasn't just a business model, it was a philosophy. Her father, Pastor Phil Byers, said, "God turns trash into treasure. Nothing is wasted." Amanda believed that, about furniture and about people. Her husband, Davy Blackburn, said she saw potential in people that they couldn't even see in themselves. Amanda Grace Byers was born on July 31st, 1987 in Muskegon, Michigan. She grew up in a faith-filled home with 4 adopted siblings, eventually settling in Elkhart, Indiana, where her dad pastored First Baptist Church. She graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, then attended Pensacola Christian College in Florida, earning an associate's degree in 2008. She went on to teach kindergarten, first in Nashville, then at an elite all-girls school in Memphis. In classroom videos, her calm, nurturing energy is obvious. Faith, family, and service. That was Amanda. Amanda met Davy Blackburn on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson concert. During a milkshake contest, she laughed so hard it came out of her nose, and Davy later said that's when he knew he'd marry her. They wed on August 1st, 2008, and in 2012 moved to Indianapolis to plant Resonate Church, focused on reaching people who normally avoided church. Amanda poured herself into ministry and the 4Indy movement. By November 2015, they had a 15-month-old son, Weston, and she was about 12 weeks pregnant with their daughter, Evie Grace. By the early hours of November 10th, 2015, 3 other people in Indianapolis were also awake. 18-year-old Larry Joe Taylor Jr., 21-year-old Jalen Watson, 24-year-old Deanna Gordon. They lived together at the Westlake Apartments and called themselves the Kill Gang. All 3 were on parole. All 3 had already been on a crime spree. A week before, on November 3rd, Taylor and Watson broke into a young woman's apartment in the same complex. She was in the shower when the lights suddenly went out. As she peeked out from behind the curtain, she saw a man with a gun pointed at her. Taylor pressed the gun to the back of her neck and demanded money and cards. While Watson ransacked the apartment, Taylor sexually assaulted her. They left with her belongings and her car. The next day, November 4th, Taylor shot and killed Rolando Gonzalez Hernandez during a robbery attempt. Hernandez had just $10 on him. Witnesses later said Taylor admitted to the shooting himself. By November 10th, the trio was still hunting. Around 4:30 a.m. on November 10th, the group targeted the first home of the day in a complex called Cottages of Fall Creek. They slipped in through a patio door while the residents slept, stealing electronics, credit cards, and a silver Chrysler Sebring. But they made a mistake. A motion-activated security camera captured their faces before they unplugged it. Taylor wanted to kill the sleeping occupant to eliminate a witness. Watson and Gordon persuaded him to leave. At 5:23 a.m., that victim called 911 to report the burglary. Minutes later, at 5:36 a.m., they hit another home, 2830 Sunnyfield Court on Indianapolis's northwest side. They disabled a camera, came in through a patio window, and stole multiple televisions, jewelry, a laptop, bed sheets, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater. They drank beer and wine inside the home and loaded stolen TVs into the Sebring. But the loot to them wasn't enough. They wanted more money. Just across the street at 2826 Sunnyfield Court lived Davy and Amanda Blackburn. Around 6:10 a.m., Davy left his house for LA Fitness. He had been up early, reading his Bible. Wanting not to wake his pregnant wife and toddler, he left quietly and left the front door unlocked. The couple only had one key, and it was on Amanda's key ring. That small habit would have catastrophic consequences. Surveillance cameras captured Davy driving away at 6:11 a.m. Moments later, Taylor saw him leave and decided their next target would be the Blackburn home. All 3 men entered through the unlocked front door. Inside was Amanda, home alone, pregnant, and just starting her morning. According to later testimony, Taylor struck her in the mouth with his .38 caliber revolver, knocking out one of her front teeth. He forced her to hand over her bank cards, then sent Watson and Gordon out to ATMs while he stayed behind with Amanda. Cell phone records placed the suspects' phones on Sunnyfield Court at 6:25 a.m. By 6:36 a.m., Watson and Gordon were at a Chase Bank ATM trying to withdraw $500 with Amanda's card. The transaction failed. They called Taylor, who yelled at them and gave the correct PIN. Back at the house, the situation with Amanda escalated. Taylor later claimed he tried to force her to have sex, and when she refused and charged at him, he shot her once in the upper body and then again in the back of the head. Witnesses would later testify that he said he watched her bleed. At 6:45 a.m., a neighbor heard what sounded like gunshots. At 6:54 a.m., security cameras captured Watson and Gordon at another Chase ATM, successfully withdrawing $400. Watson wrapped the stolen pink sweater around his face to hide from the camera. That sweater would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the whole case. Around 7:10 a.m., cameras recorded a hooded figure leaving the Blackburn neighborhood. Watson and Gordon picked Taylor up shortly after. As he got in the car, he allegedly told them, "I smoked her." While this was happening, Davey was at LA Fitness. He left around 7:10 a.m., called a friend on the drive home, and sat in his driveway on the phone for 40-50 minutes, trying not to wake Amanda. From the outside, everything looked normal. Inside, it was anything but. At 7:53 a.m., Chase Bank called Amanda's phone about suspicious ATM activity. Around 8:17 a.m., a neighbor reported their own home had been burglarized. 3 minutes later, Davey finally went inside. He found Amanda on the living room floor by the Christmas tree, face down in a pool of blood, partially undressed, with furniture knocked over and a Swisher Sweet cigar wrapper on the counter, something that didn't belong there. Upstairs, baby Weston was still asleep and unharmed. Davey called 911 at 8:22 a.m., panicked and struggling to explain what he was seeing. Amanda was rushed to Indiana University Health Methodist Hospital and placed on a ventilator with catastrophic brain injuries. Detectives quickly verified Davey's alibi through gym footage and phone records and canvassed the neighborhood, linking the attack to the earlier burglary across the street. On November 11, 2015, about 24 hours after the shooting, Amanda was taken off life support. She and her unborn daughter, Evie Grace, were both pronounced dead. The Marion County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. Amanda had 3 gunshot wounds: a fatal wound to the back of her head, a wound to her lower left arm that traveled to her biceps, a through-and-through wound to her upper left back. She also had a split lip, scratches on her cheek, and a missing lower front tooth, consistent with being struck in the mouth with a gun. Autopsies in homicide cases do more than confirm cause of death. They help reconstruct what happened: the direction of the bullets, the distance of the shots, whether the victim was standing, sitting, or on the ground. In this case, the pattern of wounds supported the prosecution's later argument that Amanda was shot at close range and that she likely tried to defend herself. Given the way she was found, partially undressed with signs suggesting a possible sexual assault, many expected sexual assault charges. But prosecutors later stated there was not enough physical evidence to charge Taylor with rape in Amanda's case, even though co-defendants said he admitted trying to force himself on her. That detail is important. In criminal law, suspicion isn't enough. Prosecutors have to prove each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. Without DNA or clear physical proof, they focused on the charges they knew they could make stick: murder, burglary, robbery. CSI teams processed the scene twice. They collected blood evidence, the cigar package, and DNA samples. They photographed the positions of furniture and items, bagged shell casings, and documented any trace evidence that could later tie suspects to the house. Meanwhile, investigators did what they always do in a case like this. They looked closely at the spouse. In many domestic homicides, the partner is statistically the most likely suspect. But Davey was formally cleared as a suspect. Surveillance footage, cell phone data, and lack of motive all supported his account. Detectives saw no evidence that he was involved. They found no secret life, no insurance windfall, no affair, no prior domestic violence reports that would suggest a hidden pattern. With the family ruled out, attention shifted fully to the unknown intruders. On November 11, police found the stolen Chrysler Sebring about 7 miles from the Blackburn home. Inside were the pink sweater used as a mask, the bag of oranges and bed sheets from the earlier burglary, remote controls, and ATM receipts showing the failed $500 withdrawal at 6:36 a.m. To the average person, that might look like a pile of random junk left in a stolen car. To detectives, it was a puzzle with key pieces: clothing worn during the crime, items stolen from victims, and timestamps that lined up with the timeline of the attacks. At a press conference on November 13th, investigators released a surveillance image of a hooded figure walking through the neighborhood. "We know who killed her," one officer said. "We just don't know his name." The turning point came from DNA. Testing on the pink sweater hit in CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, and identified Jaylen Watson. CODIS is basically a massive database that stores DNA profiles from convicted offenders and some arrested individuals. When a new sample is entered, the system checks for matches. In this case, the sweater lit up with a name. From there, the investigation moved fast. Cell records traced Watson's phone from the first burglary to Sunnyfield Court at 6:25 a.m. and to the ATMs at 6:36 and 6:54 a.m. Each ping, each connection to a cell tower, placed him exactly where the victim said the attackers had been. Calls from Diana Gordon's phone led detectives to a number tied to online ads for Larry Taylor. Buyers who had unknowingly purchased stolen items later picked out both Watson and Taylor in photo lineups. The stolen electronics from the earlier burglaries had gone back into the community as cheap deals, but they carried a trail that detectives followed right back to the trio. By now, investigators had DNA linking Watson to the pink sweater cell phone, data linking Watson and Gordon to the burglaries and ATMs, a chain of possession for stolen items that pointed to Taylor's surveillance of the hooded figure in the neighborhood near the time of the shooting. On November 19th, all three, Taylor, Watson, and Gordon, were taken into custody. Watson and Gordon confessed to the burglaries and said Taylor was the shooter, quoting him saying, "I smoked her." They described how he stayed behind with Amanda, sent them to ATMs, and later bragged about what he'd done. By November 27 to 23, DNA, cell data, ATM footage, and witness statements locked in the timeline. Taylor and Watson were charged with murder, while Gordon, who never entered the house, faced related charges. Detectives stressed the victims were random targets in a string of violent crimes. For the Blackburn and Byers families, it was a strange mix of emotions. Relief that suspects had been caught, and the devastating reality that none of this would bring Amanda or Evie back. The legal process dragged on for years. Watson and Gordon took plea deals for robbery and burglary and agreed to testify against Taylor, explaining how he stayed behind with Amanda, sent them to ATMs, and later bragged that he had smoked her and watched her bleed. Their testimony, backed by phone records, DNA, and surveillance footage, helped prosecutors build a clear case. Davey also testified, reliving the morning of the attack and the moment he found Amanda. After mistrials and delays, Taylor was convicted and sentenced to 86 years, plus 20 more in a separate rape case, for a total of 106 years. Watson received 10 years in prison and 5 years of home detention and has since been released. Gordon was sentenced to 30 years, with 25 in prison and 5 on probation. Through it all, Amanda's family publicly chose forgiveness, not by minimizing what happened, but by refusing to let hatred define them. It's a reminder that these cases don't end with a verdict. Families live with the fallout long after court is over. 2 days after Amanda died, Davey registered the domain nothingiswasted.net. 2.5 months later, he registered Nothing Is Wasted Serendipity LLC. In March 2016, he bought a larger house through the business. In April, he sold the family home where Amanda had been killed. For some people, this made sense. Who could stay in the house where such a traumatic event happened? For others, it raised eyebrows, especially when combined with the rapid building of a public platform. 11 months after her death, he met a woman named Christy at LA Fitness, the same gym he'd visited on the morning of the murder. She was a single mother, and her stepfather worked as a chaplain in the very prison system that housed Amanda's killers. Davey would later describe this connection as a sign of God's personal care for him, a reminder that even in tragedy, life was not over. They married in December 2017 with Amanda's family's blessing. Their blended family eventually included 3 children, Natalia, Weston, and Cohen. In January 2018, Davey resigned from Resonate Church to focus on his new ministry, Nothing Is Wasted, which offers resources for people walking through trauma and loss, podcasts, courses, and retreats. The church closed shortly after, struggling with debt and dwindling attendance. Leaders admitted to poor financial stewardship, though no formal allegations of fraud surfaced. Nothing Is Wasted grew into a recognizable brand in the Christian self-help and trauma space. Davey shared his story repeatedly, on podcasts, at conferences, and in interviews, framing it as a journey through grief, forgiveness, and redemption. In 2024, Davey's book Nothing Is Wasted was published, telling his version of the story, how he navigated grief, forgiveness, and rebuilding his life. For supporters, his story is one of resilience. A man who lost his wife and unborn child and chose not to give up, instead turning his pain into a ministry that, they say, has helped thousands of people. For critics, the timeline feels uncomfortably fast. Business registrations, a new house, a new marriage, and a growing brand built around the worst thing that ever happened to Amanda. That tension between personal healing and public platform building is at the heart of much of the controversy. From the beginning, some people online questioned Davey, pointing to the unlocked door, his long phone call in the driveway, how quickly Nothing Is Wasted launched, and his calm media appearances and remarriage. True crime communities, Reddit threads, and comment sections began dissecting every sermon clip, every interview, every body language moment. People zoomed in on the smallest details, facial expressions, phrasing, even jokes Davey made from the pulpit about his marriage before Amanda died. Some viewers felt that his tone in certain sermons was flippant or self-focused. Others believed that any attempt to find meaning in the tragedy was disrespectful to Amanda's memory. A small but vocal group suggested darker theories that he might have somehow orchestrated the crime. But here's the key point. Hard evidence cleared him. Gym footage showed exactly when he arrived and left. Phone and cell data confirmed where he was and who he was talking to. There was no clear financial or personal motive. Most importantly, the three men whose DNA, phones, and confessions tied them directly to the crime never implicated him in any way. Police ruled his involvement physically impossible. Detectives who worked the case have repeatedly stated that they considered him, investigated him, and ruled him out. That doesn't mean people stop speculating. The internet has a way of keeping theories alive, even when law enforcement has moved on. And in cases involving religion, money, and tragedy, emotions can run especially high. It's fair for people to feel uneasy about parts of the story. It's fair to question tone, decisions, or timing. But when we engage with true crime, it's important to separate what we feel from what can actually be proven. In this case, the provable evidence points not to a conspiracy, but to a random, opportunistic burglary that turned into a double homicide. Amanda Blackburn believed broken things and broken people could be restored. She lived that out in the classroom, in her home, at garage sales, and in her church. In minutes, a random crime took her life and her unborn daughter, Evie Grace, leaving a permanent void for everyone who loved her. But her story also highlights bigger issues. How quickly a safe neighborhood can be targeted. How small habits like leaving a door unlocked can intersect with the worst kind of evil, not as blame, but as a sobering reminder of how vulnerable we all are. How families of victims have to navigate grief, media attention, and sometimes controversy all at the same time. If Amanda's story moves you, one way to honor her is to value the people around you the way she did, to see potential in others, to look for beauty in broken places, and to be more aware of what's happening in your own neighborhood. If you value respectful deep dives like this, please support Crimness by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It helps more people hear these stories in a way that keeps the focus on the victims and on the truth, not just on the sensational details. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay aware, hug your loved ones a little tighter today, and we'll see you in the next case.